You're listening to Damascus Radio, the broadcasting service of the Syrian Arab Republic. And now stay tuned for the news. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Damascus Radio, and it's time for our news for tonight, read by Bassem Bagdash. Good evening. The Russian Foreign Ministry said that Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will continue discussing ways of resolving the crisis in Syria with his U.S. counterpart John Kerry and UN envoy to Syria Lakhdar Ibrahimi on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly's meetings in New York on the basis of what was agreed upon previously. The ministry issued a statement in which it called for settling the crises in the Middle East within the frame of the recognized rules of the international law, with respecting the state's sovereignty and the territorial safety, without foreign interference and through launching internal political dialogue, adding that this fully applies to the crisis in Syria. The ministry said that Lavrov will hold a number of bilateral meetings and participate in other several meetings, such as the BRICS Foreign Ministers meeting, the International Quartet Committee for the Middle East Affairs meeting, and the Six Major Powers meeting on Iran's nuclear program. The statement added that the Russian delegation will continue to work actively with respect to the subjects of priority for the Russian Federation and the issues of the General Assembly's agenda, which tackle combating the spread of the arming race and enhancing transparency and confidence measures in this field, as well as guaranteeing the security of international media. Chairman of the Russian Duma's Foreign Affairs Committee, Alexei Pushkov, stressed that the wave of violence Iraq is witnessing is a direct result of the U.S. occupation, warning against a similar scenario in Syria. Russia Today website quoted Pushkov as posting on Twitter that U.S. President Barack Obama was against the war on Iraq, adding that Obama should clearly tell if he wants the Iraqi chaos in Syria, but he still remains silent. Units of the armed forces destroyed weapons and ammo of terrorists in Qattan al-Jabal, north of an Arab camp and east of Deir Hafir, killing and wounding a huge number of them, in addition to destroying 4 vehicles along the road between Al-Bab and Deir Hafir, eliminating all terrorists inside. Moreover, units of the armed forces destroyed 3 pads for launching missiles and mortars in Al-Jdeide, Queres, and Rasm al-Aboud villages, inflicting heavy losses among the terrorists. In Aleppo eastern countryside, units of armed forces confronted terrorists who were attempting to attack Al-Adnaniya village and killed scores of them. In Aleppo southeastern countryside, armed forces destroyed gatherings of terrorists. Units of the armed forces clashed with terrorists who tried to infiltrate into the old city of Aleppo, killing scores of them in a Zahrawi marketplace and near the Justice Palace. Israel is the real winner from the use of chemical weapons in Syria. This is a very logical fact that is being confirmed by the media outlets all over the world with evidence. The Independent is one of them. Robert Fisk, the Middle East correspondent of The Independent for more than 20 years, has recently written an article giving evidence from a journalist friend of his who accompanies the Syrian Arab Army in its operations in the suburbs of Al-Mu'addamiyeh in the western Damascus countryside. More details are in this following report.
The journalist said that he was with the Syrian Arab Army the night the chemical weapons were used, but saw no evidence of gas being used. What he does remember is the concern of the government troops when they saw the first image of gas victims on television, fearing that they themselves would have to fight amid the poisonous fumes. Frontliner Syrian forces do carry gas masks, but none was seen wearing any. Fisk asked some questions that confirmed that the Syrian forces didn't use chemical weapons, such as why use gas when so much more lethal weaponry is being flung at rebel forces across the country. If the government wanted to use gas, why not employ it north of Aleppo? Why in Damascus? And why wasn't gas used on this scale in the previous 2 years? And why employ such a dreadful weapon when the end result is that Syria, by giving up its stocks of chemical weapons, has efficiently lost one of its strategic defenses against an Israeli invasion? Wasn't Israel the real winner in all this? Finally, Fisk concludes that Israel is the real winner after all, and it benefits not only from the chemical weapons incidents, but also from the bloody war in Syria.
Patriarch John X, Yazigi of Antioch and all the East for the Greek Orthodox Church, re-emphasized the importance of national dialogue among Syrians away from foreign intervention to solve the crisis in Syria. Yazigi called in a statement in Paris for adopting dialogue as an option to reach solutions that end the plight of the Syrian people and spare the neighboring countries its consequences. Patriarch Yazigi said that he reviewed the latest contacts pertaining to the issue of the two kidnapped bishops, Syriac Orthodox and the Greek Orthodox archbishops of Aleppo, Yohanna Ibrahim and Paul Yazigi, who were kidnapped by an armed terrorist group last April. General Secretariat of the Arab National Conference reiterated rejection of all forms of aggression against Syria, affirming that the U.S. threats are aimed at destroying its capabilities. The Secretariat said that the U.S. aggression backed by outside powers and some Arab regimes is intended to debilitate Syria's military capabilities in order to enhance the security of Israel. The Secretariat stressed that the aggression on Syria is divorced from any human or ethical principles, adding that the temporary retreat of the aggression is attributed to Syria's steadfastness and the support of its allies against it. The General Secretariat also urged all parties concerned to convene the International Conference on Syria as soon as possible and end all kinds of instigation and the funding and arming of the terrorist groups to pave the way for a political solution. Families of the abducted Lebanese people staged a sit-in in front of the offices of the Turkish Airlines company and the Turkish Cultural Center in Beirut, demanding the release of their relatives. The families held the Turkish government responsible for the abduction of their relatives after it has been proved openly involved in supporting the terrorist groups and facilitating the entry of Takfiris from all over the world into Syria. The sit-in was a resumption of the abductees' families' peaceful moves of a protest outside the Turkish interests and centers in Lebanon to demand the Turkish government release their relatives given its open influence on the terrorist groups. Tens of thousands of Yemenis protested the U.S. threats against Syria, U.S. plots regarding the Arab nation, and the unlimited U.S. support for Israel. In Sana'a, participants marched across the city streets in protest against Israel's nuclear arsenal, the U.S. plots against the region, and Syria in particular, calling upon the world to stand against the U.S. support of Israel, which includes finding, arming, and facilitating its development of its nuclear arsenal. The participants rejected the U.S.-Israeli plots against the region, which involve inciting sectarian sedition to fragment the nation's people and weaken them, condemning the U.S. interference in Arab affairs. In Sana'a, thousands marched to voice support of Syria, calling upon the international community to refrain from using double standards when handling the Syrian issue, calling for all weapons of mass destruction to be put under international supervision, including the Israeli arsenal. The participants also called for unity in the face of the U.S.-Israeli conspiracies and raising awareness among Arab and Islamic people. The Russian Black Sea Fleet Press Secretary Colonel Vyacheslav Trushkavev announced that the missile cruiser Moskva has arrived in the Mediterranean on Friday to lead the ships of the Russian Permanent Naval Formation. The leadership of the Russian Operational Formation is now on board Moskva cruiser, and the information includes warships from the fleets of the Black Sea, the Pacific, and the Baltic. Moskva cruiser, which is under the leadership of Deputy Commander of the Black Sea Fleet, Rear Admiral Valery Kulikov, set off last July the 3rd from Sevastopol port to carry out a long-range cruise. In Iraq, 6 of the Iraqi special police officers martyred in a terrorist attack carried out by 4 suicidal terrorists against the police station to the north of the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. An Iraqi security source clarified that 4 terrorists attacked the police station near Biji town to the north of the capital, Baghdad, and shot fire at the station guards. The exchange of shooting resulted in the killing of one of the attackers, as the other 3 blew themselves up after the arrival of the army's enhancements to the place of attack, which led to the martyrdom of 6 Iraqi police officers. The source added that the 4 terrorists were wearing the Rapid Deployment Forces uniform, which made the attack easier on them. Thousands of Bahrainis took to the streets to denounce oppressive measures and unprecedented security escalation exercised by Al Khalifa against the Bahraini people and to demand the release of political prisoners. The demonstrators denounced the decision taken by Al Khalifa to close the Islamic Religious Council, asserting that such escalation will make the Bahrainis more determined in their demand of democracy, justice, and equality. Moreover, masses took part in the sit-in held in Hurriya Square, west of the capital Al-Manama, that also witnessed mass night demos despite strict measures imposed by Al Khalifa security authorities. A police compound in the Turkish capital Ankara was struck by 3 rockets. 2 buildings belonging to the National Police Directorate in the district of Dikmen were hit, but no one was hurt, and the 3rd fell into the grounds. Dikmen is one of the places across Turkey where anti-government protests have flared in recent months. Meanwhile, Erdogan's forces arrested 11 demonstrators in Istanbul after dispersing a protest that took to the streets denouncing Erdogan's policy at the internal and external levels. And now over to the final item that says Deputy Minister of Economy and Foreign Trade asserted that more than 90% of goods are allowed to be imported, as the decree of controlling the import process came to provide the market with the basic needs of goods and medicine, in addition to agricultural and industrial equipment for production. He also said that many centralized instructions were issued by the Central Bank of Syria in order to take advantage of the credit facility line in regard to the public sector. With that last item, ladies and gentlemen, we conclude our news for tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. Damascus Radio presents News and Views.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The political scene now is apparently different from that before, especially when the U.S. waved the flag of war against Syria. On its part, Russia has set an initiative while the U.S. hastily took up the initiative in order to evade the embarrassment it had already put itself in, namely, in the face of the international and popular protests, including the internal ones. The U.S. desire to spare itself the act that can only be described as a breach of the international legitimacy, like a direct aggression. It's worth noting here that the initial agreement between Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov and U.S. Secretary of State Kerry disappointed the members of the opposition in Istanbul, besides the states that are supporting them. On the short run, it seems the issue of the chemical weapons is the point. However, it is far more than that issue. Kerry and Lavrov underscored the necessity of solving the Syrian crisis with political means. They also highlighted the necessity of holding an international peace conference in Syria. Later on, they shall agree on the steps to be taken for that conference for the sake of putting an end to the terrorism that struck the Syrian territories. However, those supported terrorism in Syria raised their voices rejecting the agreement held between Russia and USA, acting as if they possessed the final decision. They are nothing but tools and collectors executing agendas which are full of indignation and hatred towards the Syrian people. Eventually, victory will be owned by Syria's people and army, while the homeland's flag shall be on top of all. Syria will be the sustainable fortress confronting the Zionist conspiracies in addition to its Arab traitors from the Gulf.
That was news and views from Damascus Radio. Damascus Radio presents Syrian Local Press Review.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The papers published in Damascus today highlighted the following headlines and news items. The Syrian armed forces restore security to the villages of As-Sultaniya, Salam Gharbi and Salam Sharqi in Homs countryside. The forces also eliminated tens of terrorists who belonged to Al-Nusra Front and destroyed rockets, mortar cannons and cars loaded with weapons in the countryside of Damascus, Aleppo, Daraa and Idlib. Assistant Regional Secretary of PATH Arab Socialist Party Hilal carries out an inspection tour to the quarter of At-Tadamun. He says that the Wahhabi and Takfiri project, along with its terrorists' tools, are doomed to termination. Brazil, Argentina, Haiti and Angola called for a political solution for the Syrian crisis. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry discuss in a phone call the general conditions in Syria. Lavrov says that deliberations in the Security Council pertaining to the chemical weapons in Syria are progressing in a satisfactory manner. The front page editorial in Thawra Daily says that the U.S. is the top partner in the terrorism ranging from Afghanistan to Iraq to Libya and now to Syria. Even the French side, which the teachings of the American master, spoke of arming the terrorists in Syria and furthermore training them. Now that Britain, USA and France have felt the uselessness of the Security Council. Therefore, the political solution has been and will never be in their agenda. They find the plots and schemes as the salvation from the dilemma they have put themselves in. Above all odds, the Americans have tried supporting terrorism before. They did support and cooperate with the terrorist organizations, but it proved be not an experience to take, the paper concludes.